Hi, everybody, and welcome to our panel discussion with BambooHR and Glassdoor and Up on engagement. Just first, a little reminder about the abstract. The concept of engagement, employee engagement, is widely discussed in HR and other circles now. But the question for a lot of people is, what does that really look like on the ground and in practice? And we have three great presenters with us here today from Glassdoor and Up from BambooHR. I'm also from BambooHR. My name's Rob. And today we have Cassie Whitlock and Carmel Galvin and Shawn Vanderhoven. Cassie is the Director of Human Resources at BambooHR, and she has been the Director since 2012. She is an observer of human nature and uses her 17 years of HR experience to aid organizations, teams, and individuals in building systems, processes, and communication patterns that align with business objectives. Belief that success is built by the contributions of each individual is what inspired her to focus her talents on human capital development. She earned her master's degree in human resources from Utah State University and a bachelor's degree in business management and accounting from Utah Valley University. Welcome, Cassie. We also have Carmel Galvin. Carmel is the Chief Human Resources Officer of Glassdoor. She is responsible for directing all the people functions of the company, including strategic human resources planning, learning and development, talent acquisition, total rewards, employee relations, employee engagement and culture management, compliance issues, and more. She brings nearly 25 years of extensive international experience in HR from information services, tech and finance industries, and her background includes a particular focus on executive leadership, coaching, and developing organizational culture and employee engagement programs. Most recently, Carmel served as Senior Vice President and CHRO at Advent Software, where she oversaw the company's global people strategies and programs. Prior to Advent, she served as Vice President of Talent and Culture Development for Deloitte's New Venture Accelerator, advising a growing portfolio of innovative companies on how to scale and adjust their culture and talent programs. Carmel holds a bachelor's degree in political science and business from Trinity College of Dublin and completed a master's degree in business studies at the University College Dublin's Smurfit School of Business. Welcome to Carmel. Finally, we have Shawn Vanderhoven. Shawn is the founder of Up, where he works with leadership teams at leading brands like Adobe, Amazon, Deloitte, Intel, LinkedIn, and Salesforce, to name a few. He is a collaborator on the New York Times bestseller Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. He has consulted for government agencies, including the U.S. Senate and the U.S. Department of Defense. Before consulting, he led the growth of his family software company by 30 times. He lives in Menlo Park, California with his wife and their three boys, where he is currently researching the neuroscience behind why we follow certain leaders. Welcome, Shawn, and it is time to kick off with the questions. The first question, and I'll go with Shawn on this one. How does your company measure employee engagement?
Well, thanks for having me on. Right now, I'm thinking about a couple companies on that I'm working with and doing projects with on how they do this. And so I think that, I'll just kind of name a few. And it brings me back to a conversation that I was having with Shawn, the CEO of Adobe. And it was several years ago. And he said to me, listen, the biggest problem that I have here in the Valley is that people can just walk across the street if they find something better, because there's just so many talented companies. It's attrition. And so I know that other people have thoughts on this, and so I just like to kind of think about this one real obvious idea, and that is, simply what does your attrition look like, and especially in the most important roles within the business. It's a hard thing in today's day and age with so many options. I had a friend say to me from Northwest Mutual the other day. He said, "Listen, when I grew up, I felt like, in my career, much older fellow, he said, I felt like I had to be engaged But I get the sense from younger people today that they almost feel like it's an option if they don't feel like that the meaning, the purpose, and the alignment is there. And so, at any given time, someone is either, going towards engaging more within our organization, becoming more aligned with what they're trying to accomplish in their lives and how they feel like that matches with what the company's trying to accomplish, or they're going the opposite direction. I mean, so this real obvious thing that we've got to solve is just to make sure that our attrition is extremely low. And there's several different measures to look at there. I mean, I hear this over and over again. Another CEO of Ogilvy, New York, about a year ago said, hey, listen, the biggest problem that I have is just losing people way too early. He said, listen, I know that, lifetime employment's kind of gone, at least in his industry. He's like, but man, it hurts us when we lose people long before we think that they're done here, or that we would hope that they would be done here. So I think kind of to start off with this really simple idea of really looking at attrition and how do you dive into that deep so that way people don't leave before you'd really capitalize together on a real win-win.
Hey, Shawn, this is Cassie. I'd like to add on to what you said there. Obviously, turnover is a big, easy number to look at. One of the things that we look at internally here at Bamboo is actually an employee net promoter score, so an ENPS, which is more of an active engagement measure as opposed to the reactive on the turnover side. Another area that I think people tend to overlook is some of the more natural and casual, authentic ways to measure engagement within your organization. Let's talk about your managers and how they have one-on-ones with their employees. Are they having conversations to see where people are at, and is their heart and mind involved, or is just their body showing up to work every day? One of the things that we're trying to focus on at Bamboo is we have a couple of opportunities where we embrace the skip level concept. So whether it's a pick six and our founders sit down with 4 employees and they talk about how's it going, to be very invested, and it helps us to measure on not just an individual level but on a department level where engagement is at, what are the frustrations they're seeing, what are the successes that they're seeing. And then we'll also do skip level meetings. I'll often just go and meet with employees to see what they're focused on and how they're enjoying their experience here at Bamboo. So those are a couple of other ideas I wanted to share.
And moving to Carmel. Carmel, how do you at Glassdoor go from, or how do you know that companies are going from beginning engagement to actually measuring engagement and finding the results from that?
Yeah, so hey there. Thanks for having me on the panel. Appreciate it. So yeah, Glassdoor is kind of interesting. It's an interesting company to be part of and actually working in HR because anyone who's familiar with Glassdoor, you'll know that one of the core concepts that we embrace here is transparency, and so we're very feedback rich. We get a lot of feedback, not just through our own Glassdoor reviews, which really helps us gauge the level of engagement at a high level with respect to our own employees who regularly leave plenty of reviews for us to respond to. But then we also have a pulse survey that we run quarterly internally, which we take both the data from that survey as well as the Glassdoor review data, and we do a fairly rigorous quantitative analysis of, with looking at the sentiment through the comments and sort of getting a feel for what the big buckets of issues might be or concerns that exist among our employee population, or indeed things that we're doing really well so that we can react to those and kind of build on them. But just like Cassie mentioned, we also do a lot of qualitative stuff as well. So we have a formal monthly check-in meeting program that we use instead of a traditional performance review program. And so that's an opportunity for our managers to check in one-on-one with their employees and get a feel for how the employees are doing and what they need in terms of being able to do their jobs better, but also where their heads are at generally with respect to the company. And then we gather lots of feedback through exit interviews and our offboarding so that we, again, turnover is an interesting but lagging indicator of how employees are feeling about the company. But it does help us, combine it with the other data to help us think about what we need to be doing and where we need to focus our efforts around engagement to make sure that we're responding across the board. So And similarly with onboarding, we try and grab some feedback from the employees who are just joining us, trying to capture what it was that compelled them to come work for us and what triggered their interest, and then how do we capitalize upon that to make sure that their experience here at Glassdoor continues to be great. So yeah, in short, we use a variety of different analytical but also qualitative mechanisms to help us gather all of that data, and then we have to do the heavy lifting of going out and actually talking with the employees and getting a feel for what's really on their minds. So that's Glassdoor.
Great. Does anyone want to add anything before we move on to the next question?
I'd love to jump in here. This is Cassie again. One of the things that I think is important is if you really want to successfully measure employee engagement, it has to be done on all levels within your organization. If it's not a group effort and it's only something talked on a leadership level, you're going to have less success. And that's something that we try to do here at Bamboo through our values that we've established, is giving everyone ownership on the experience that we all have when we come here every day. So I think that's an important thing to recognize.
Yeah, I'd just like to say something about that as well. This is Shawn. It's really about the people. It's about their hearts. And I'll mention some of this and some of the research that we've done, as we get deeper into these second questions. But just to say what Cassie said, I love that. I mean, we're talking about humans and what they need in their lives. And engagement is directly connected to how an individual feels like that. The work that they're doing is going to meeting their needs, is fulfilling to them. It helps them be whole. And so if there's one thing that I love this idea of, it's, if we try to create whole workplaces where people can really be the best versions of themselves, and if that's our real goal from a leadership perspective, there's just some natural things that occur from engagement. We naturally hit on engagement because we're focused on the whole person. We recognize, that these people are leading lives of meaning and value. And so we design at every level in the organization to really reach the hearts of the people that we're in. And this is, like Cassie said, I love this. This is at every level, every touch point in the organization.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. So our next question is, how do you convey needed changes or improvements to employees without overlooking their efforts and successes? And to me, this really felt like almost a performance management question more than an engagement question. So I'd like to start off with Cassie. We were discussing this earlier, and have her talk a little bit about how this question really relates to engagement and how you can use the processes that you have in place to encourage that.
Yeah, thanks. This can often feel hard. It's easy for team members, managers to kind of get bogged down in the perception of negativity when you're having to give someone feedback or highlight an opportunity to improve or step up a level. But that's exactly what it is. So I think first there's the opportunity to focus on the real positive and less on, I'm telling you you're not good enough. Because if that's really your message, you're approaching it wrong. You're never going to get the results you want. I think it has to start with, do you have trust built in the relationship? I know in my role functioning in human resources, it's critical that I spend active time going out and connecting and having relationships with different team members so that when in the capacity of my role, I'm interacting usually in a highly critical moment, they know that I care about them first and foremost as a human being. Together, we'll work together to have a plan. So a couple of things that I like to use to help stay focused on the positivity is I like to establish what's standard and what's exceptional. And when you're speaking from the standard or the need of the role versus being the rock star, that's where you're positioning all of the need for change and improvement is towards excellence rather than away from poor performance. And that's a really positive way. Making sure it's defined and clear. So many times you just, hey, you're doing better. What does better mean? Is better good enough? I don't know. And so being willing to get into the details and be concrete and follow it up in writing so that there's clarity for the employee who's striving to improve and the manager whose job it is to get that improvement out of them. And then something that we've done here at Bamboo, which I'm hoping to see good results from, is we've actually gone through and trained team members how to give and receive feedback. Let's be honest, it really sucks to have somebody say you're not good enough. It hurts. And so can we all develop a common language and an openness and willingness to approach these conversations and know what the intent is that sometimes those internal feelings fight against?
I thought this question really related to Glassdoor's whole mission, in the sense of giving feedback is kind of the concept. And I was wondering Carmel, what your perspective is on the ability to do that in your organization with this question.
So can you just to clarify, you're saying in terms of gathering feedback from our employees?
I think this more relates to how how management can give feedback.
Sorry.
And be able to be critical without at the same time missing the fact that they're doing well in a lot of ways.
Yeah, sorry, just wanted to clarify. So it's actually something that has been very top of mind for us. Since I joined Glassdoor, we spent a fair amount of time thinking about how to better leverage our performance management program to help us actually use it to create better performance. Because a lot of times, they're very clunky programs that don't actually result in an uptick in performance. So in thinking about that, we implemented a program which we call Accelerate, which is this lighter touch, more regular feedback. So similar to many companies that are doing this now, where you go to less sort of infrequent feedback to employees, which oftentimes is the reason for a lot of this concern around balancing the feedback, because people get surprised. They haven't heard anything all year, and then they get a dump of feedback at one time, which doesn't necessarily make sense because it's out of the context of what they've been doing right now. So we've moved to this more regular program that I mentioned earlier, which is we have monthly check-ins with our employees. And the idea there is that right at the time you're doing the work, you get direct feedback about what's working and what's not, and it feels a little less sort of confrontational, and it's a bit more aligned with the context of what you're doing right now. So you get a chance to review what's worked, what hasn't, and sort of set the tone for the next month so that you understand where you need to go and what you might be doing better. And it's meant to be two-way, so that the manager gets to give feedback around what the employee is doing, but equally the employee gets to ask questions and seek out resources or help around obstacles they're encountering, and so on. So it's been really helpful. We're pretty early in terms of implementing this, but so far we've had good feedback from our employees that they feel like they have a lot less surprises around how they're doing, and they feel like they're much more in the driving seat around their own contributions, and they're able to seek help when they need to. And it encourages that sort of continuing dialogue. And then I guess the most important thing, or maybe not the most important, but certainly a big uptick for us, was that it takes a lot less time, and it actually forces those regular conversations that are a little less onerous for managers to sort of gather all that feedback for that once-a-year effort, and they can do these little check-ins in 15 minutes once a month, touch base, and then move forward. And then when we do sit down for a little bit more of a substantial conversation around career development, we have a lot more data to lean on. We've gathered a lot of that stuff over the course of the several months, so it makes the whole process a little bit more efficient and seamless. But yeah, and I think that's helped us achieve that balance between constructive feedback as well as giving people recognition for where they're doing really well and where you want them to leverage those strengths.
Thanks, Carmel. And Shawn, your perspective has got to be pretty in-depth on this because of your work with leaders. How are you coaching leaders to sort of accomplish this goal?
Yeah, I really, I like what's been said so far, and so I'll try not to be redundant and pair, when we think about coaching, what it is that we're trying to do is we're building systems with leaders. But I like, kind of play off of something that Cassie said early. It's this word that we like to use is real. What's real? What's the situation? What's the role? What's the goal? What's the situation that the employee's in, and what's the job to be done? I like that from Clayton Christensen. And I think that what we're trying to do is really clarify what's real, and then to have a conversation, to build into our models from a leadership perspective at all levels, at the senior level, the middle level, and the frontline level, that there is just this constant conversation about what's real. Because what people really want is they want to be affirmed for the things that they've done well, and they want to be able to understand how they can improve, and people are hungry for this. And part of that comes from this alignment to like great clarity in the organization on what it is that we're trying to accomplish, why we exist, even if we don't even know the destination, even if we only know the direction of a particular initiative that we're involved in, because maybe it's transformational and groundbreaking in nature. But what people want is they want to know what's real, like what's really expected of me, and then they want their leaders to be having a conversation with them. Check-ins are great. This idea of check-ins, so you don't have this, once a year you get smacked with this massive, set of feedback and survey, and there's not been a conversation. Oh, that's terrible. Imagine doing that with a teenager. Talking to them maybe once a year on how they're doing. I have 3 boys that are teenagers, and we are like checking in every single day. You can imagine. And so I think people want what's real. They want to know what it is that's expected of them. They do want to know what it means to be awesome and how to improve. And they want their leaders to be curious about their work. They want leaders to know how to ask great questions and how to listen. And so what we look at from a leadership perspective is, how do you get at what's real? How do you design a program of really looking at what improvements need to be made, where we're constantly coming back to what's real for the organization, what's real for the individual, at all levels of leadership, at the top, in the middle, and on the front line. And that principle, that guiding principle on, hey, let's figure out what's real here, we see companies just do incredible things with check-ins, with different styles of net promoter scores, even on a weekly basis, on a project basis, to be able to kind of, create data that gives managers easy conversations. And so I will say that this idea of getting very, utility out of data to drive conversations that are helpful, getting back to what's real, this is what leaders need to be focusing on. If they can design programs that get to what's real and produce data so the conversation is natural and it's regular, I just second what everybody else has said. People are hungry for this type of an environment.
Great. I actually think that dovetails really nicely into our next question, which is that we all know that employee engagement is a two-way street. It's a mutually beneficial. An engaged employee is going to be happier with their job, and the company is going to see the benefits of more engagement. So the question is, what can you do to help align individual employee goals with overarching company goals? And I'd like to add on, how do you make sure that the company's goals are actually supporting individual employee goals as well? And I'll lead off with Carmel on this question.
So this is an interesting one. I was thinking about this particularly with regards to employee engagement. And I guess just before I tackle, because we have a pretty formal system for establishing employee goals which flow from company goals, I think it's probably useful to just point out that we think employee engagement starts before our employees actually even become our employees. And so we make a fairly strong effort to share our mission and vision with our candidates, and make sure that they understand that when they onboard here as an employee, our new hire orientation really sets the tone for where the goals line up after that. So we try to make sure everyone's familiar with what we're trying to accomplish on a higher level from a mission standpoint as a company, and the values that and behaviors that we expect to see from every employee to support that mission. And then from there, we start to cascade those into thinking about, well, what does that mean on a day-to-day basis or on a month-to-month basis with respect to what we're trying to achieve each year for the company. And so we use a formal OKR system to help us, which is, objectives and key results for anyone who's not familiar with it. And it's a program a lot of companies use here, particularly in the Bay Area, to help manage alignment between the company goals and the employee goals. And so each quarter, teams set OKRs for their team that are directly responding into the company goals for that quarter. And then every manager is expected to work with their employees to help them establish personal OKRs for themselves that line up underneath those team goals, which then flow into the company goals. So we try to make sure those are sort of an important mechanism for us to help ensure that we're all focused on the right stuff and supporting that overall mission. And more importantly, though, we publish them for everyone. So we have all of our employee OKRs are available to everyone to see on our wiki here. And so we try to encourage people to connect their own goals to something that someone else is doing in another team and so on, so that people can see and it's visible to them what everyone's trying to do and how that's supporting the overall set of goals at the company level. So it's become kind of a part of the fabric of our operating rhythm here at Glassdoor. But again, I think it's really crucial that the tone is set from the beginning and so that people understand what those goals are all in service of and ultimately helping us to achieve our mission as a company.
Awesome, thank you. Cassie, I know that beginning employee engagement or starting the mission of employee engagement before the new employee even steps in the door is a big priority for BambooHR as well. Is there anything critical or crucial that you want to add to what Carmel was saying?
Yeah, first of all, I totally agree with what Carmel said. It has to start before people even get to you. So there's a sense of brand awareness. If you start with your strong why, sharing your mission, vision, values, then those who are drawn to that, those who want to be engaged by that, are going to come to you. So then it's critical that you've looked at your hiring process. And in that process, are you effectively screening to find that double opt-in win, where you can find the alignment? Are you taking the time in your screening process for hiring managers to understand and explore the career ambitions for people? So an example of that, at BambooHR, we're a little bit odd, but we think it produces great results. So we generally try to have a fairly flat organization, which is a killer if you want to climb the corporate ladder, so to speak. So we have more in-depth conversations about what does progress and growth and career progression look like here at Bamboo. And it isn't always encompassed by a title, because we do ask everyone to lead from where you are. That's one of our values. And we don't do it through titles. It's done through the everyday. If it's the right thing to do, you do it. If it's within your wheelhouse and you have the power, you speak up and you influence, and we all get to better places. So I think it's important to spend time during that hiring process actually understanding to see if you're going to have that win-win opportunity. And Rob, to go back to your question, when you talk about do the company goals actually help the individual, hopefully your leadership team has been thoughtful enough to include the human element into your company goals, whether it's through your mission statement or your vision statement or even specifically within the goals that you set, right? You're classically going to have a revenue goal. And if we all drive towards revenue, do we do it in ways that it actually breaks something else in your organization or is counterproductive towards other goals? So BambooHR, one of our values is enjoy quality of life, which means when we set a revenue goal, it doesn't mean that you work 60, 80 hours a week in order to hit the goal. If you do that, we actually kill what it is that we're trying to do, and we're not meeting our goals. And then, of course, I would recommend for managers, sometimes employees don't actually know what they want. I want to be a manager. Well, why? Do you understand the bigger why of what it is that they want? And then you can start to connect. Here are your strengths. Here's where you can see those strengths displayed in that. And then they can set goals apply them to how their day-to-day role actually functions within the organization, look for unique project opportunities or ways to expand their skill set. So I think it's absolutely doable, but it does take some deliberate thought and effort both by employees and their managers.
Awesome. Shawn, I would imagine that with development and leadership coaching, you have a lot of experience with reconciling sort of executive priorities with what you'd call employee priorities on the engagement level. Can you speak a little bit to that and how you elevate the importance of employee goals and how they interrelate to the company's goals overall?
Yeah, and I appreciate there was something that Cassie just said in this last piece that really resonates with a lot of the work that I've been involved in, and that is, when you think about people just not knowing what they want. That's a reality. We know we need a job, and you may have a really great brand, and so it makes sense to apply to your company, but it doesn't necessarily mean that people really know what it is that they're exactly trying to accomplish and where they want to end up. Obviously, the clearer they are and the more trust that you have with them and they share that with you, the easier it is to stitch together, two sides of a zipper that can really work during the time that you're working together. And so there's this just one word I think that we all resonate with, and that's just the idea of building great coaches. A coach knows that their players, their team members will move on to do other great things, but they have two roles. One role is to make sure that the existing team just kills it, knocks it out of the park. And then the other role that they have is that people are growing in such a way that they can move on, that they can go beyond the team. And so this idea of really building coaches who recognize that, there's a million stories in each of our companies, and we all have one. And that each story, if you just get down to the one person, the one individual, the key to all of the company is understanding, okay, what is this person's story? And how can we help them and serve them to get clear on what it is that they're really trying to accomplish? And if you lead with what Cassie said, if you lead, as well was said, I think twice now, it's this idea, this is why we exist. This is our big why. This is our reason for existing in life. And this is what we're trying to do. This is the mission. And here's how we do it. Here's our values. This is the way that we do things around here. And of course, if that's super clear, then we know that we've got to immediately move on to coaching and say, okay, we've got to help draw out of our people the same thing for them. Why do they feel like they exist? What are they trying to do? And how do they care about doing these things? And to recognize they might not know. And so building the management skills, the front line and the middle management skills to really become incredible coaches at helping people get cleared both from a compass perspective and from a direction perspective, what it is they're trying to accomplish. It is like one of the coolest services that we can offer people. I just actually spoke with an executive, was doing some research and asked him, who was really transformational early in their career. And it was a leader who took the time to really help him clarify what he wanted, and then helped him, build on this one piece at a time. He was a great coach. Coaches are curious, they're empathic, and they have a desire to try to help people win beyond the season, beyond the team.
Thanks a lot. So for the next question, which is, how do you know if your employee engagement initiative is working? I think this goes back a little bit to measuring employee engagement, but at the same time, we could talk about it more along the granular level of how do you know at the ground level whether what you're doing and the initiatives that if you have an idea, for instance, in Bamboo, we're month to month we're doing or quarter to quarter we're doing different initiatives for the employees to be all in, for instance, and that can be a little bit lofty to try and tag anything measurable too. So the question is, how do you know that these more lofty goals with engagement are actually having an effect? And I guess I'll start with Cassie on that one.
Okay, I will go first. I actually have a personal preference, and it's probably not the correct business answer, but I'm going to share it because it's what I like to do. I like to get real with individuals. So one of the ways that I like to measure initiatives is just taking the time to chat with folks. And again, it goes back to getting those relationships, and you'll be surprised at what you learn, the outcomes you are getting from those initiatives that you hadn't even considered as possible outcomes. So I really like the opportunity of talking to specific individuals and seeing what their experience is. But it also, the question promotes the response of, have you ensured that within your initiative you have designed an assessment element? How will you measure it? And oftentimes this is where it starts to feel hard. And my thought there is you can measure anything you want to measure if you're willing to look for it. And second, what are the problems you're seeing, or what's the benefit that you wanted to see? You're already seeing something in your organization, so you can measure that. And sometimes it can be as simple as how many times are you getting complaints about the flavor of the ice from the ice machine. Well, that may not necessarily be an engagement initiative. As those complaints drop, whatever you've done has had the desired effect. Or likewise, if you're looking for more feedback from employees, are your channels for getting employee questions, feedback, comment boxes, are you getting higher volumes? Are the topics the quality that you're looking for? And then you're going to know. So I do think you can measure anything you want to. You just have to be more willing to put in the effort to get there.
And Carmel, how's Glassdoor approaching this in terms of measuring whether engagement programs and initiatives are working?
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so it is kind of similar to the first question. So we do, obviously we use the surveys to help us, and we're doing them quarterly. So it gives us a pretty quick sense of how things are landing when we launch particular programs to help us boost engagement. We get some great quick feedback from our employees as to how that's landing at a high level. But I think in the long run, where we're really looking, and for it to be truly valuable to the company, we're looking for it to show up in some of the longer term measures from a business standpoint. So we do look at is it keeping employees here, first of all, but is it actually helping them be more effective in their jobs? And are we meeting our goals as an organization? And if not, are we figuring out exactly why, and is there a root cause that we can trace back to any one of the specific things that we're trying to do from an employee engagement? I mean, it sort of comes back to why are we implementing any of the engagement initiatives in the first place, and it's in service of that larger goal to help us all be more effective, both personally and in our jobs, but also as a company. And I think testing how that actually shows up in terms of our overall achievement is pretty important. And we take a really close look at the ESAT surveys and the stuff that we roll out and kind of look at our trends over time. And we might add a couple of extra questions if we've launched one particular initiative. For example, we did a fairly major overhaul on our compensation programs recently, and so we added a specific question to our survey to help us figure out how impactful that was. And we got a lot of rich feedback, some not positive and some very positive, and so it was a bit of a mix, but it helped us start the conversations that we needed to have to feel like, okay, so where did that actually land well and where did it not? And it triggered much more in-depth feedback gathering with our individual employees to help us sort of understand exactly what was underneath the sentiment that we were hearing, and we try to respond to that. And I think that's one of the things that I've certainly learned in all the years I've been doing this is you've got to close the loop. It's no point in having lots of feedback and lots of ways of measuring things if you're not actually then taking those results and coming back to your employees and closing the loop with them and telling them, we heard you, and here's what we're going to do about it, and how does that work, and continually making sure that that cycle of feedback is constant so that people feel you are taking them seriously and that it's worth their while giving you the feedback in the first place. But But yeah, so in short, that was a bit of a long-winded answer, but just in short, I think the most important thing is that it does show up in the achievement of both the employee's own goals and the company's goals in general.
I think that was a great answer. Something that really resonated for me was that focus on using the data that you've gathered, not just gathering the data and letting it sit and feeling like you've accomplished something just by doing that. Shawn, do you have any insights into sort of less conventional ways to know that employee engagement initiatives are working?
Well, Carmel hit on something that is hard to get at, but it's really important, and that's to get to what the underlying forces are at any given time. What's really going on? What are the underlying forces that you hear certain sets of feedback, but what are the root causes below that? When we focus on engagement at the root level, we listen to what's being said, but we say, okay, what's really happening here? What are the underlying forces? And then how can we get at those? It's just we're trying to go deeper, and so the direction is towards roots. In the way that we're structuring anything that we're measuring, we want to measure roots as much as possible and ask ourselves the questions. With the data that we have here, can we predict the future with this data? Do we understand the roots enough that we can see directionally we're going in the right way? And so I would just say that these two ideas, the two criteria that really matter, and just seconding what's already been said, is understanding the underlying reasons for what you're hearing. And then asking yourself the question, what direction are we going in? Can we predict can we predict what's going to happen? Can we predict the future with our data and make those predictions so then you can see where you fall short and really hit that? Employees, people they want to feel like that if they say something out loud, that something will be done with it. And this again was just said. The people want to know that you got to close the loop. Like if you're going to survey something, you've got to be really serious on doing something with that. If you're going to ask a question, it's almost better not to ask some questions that are significant if people feel like that you're not going to do anything with it. It just over time it reduces our confidence in the listening. We don't really feel like anybody's listening to us. So having said that, I think what it means to really listen is to always be trying to get at the roots. What are the root causes here? What are the underlying forces? And I think that all the mechanisms that were discussed, are exactly right on. But especially if we always know that the roots are very rarely shared up front. They're usually held back in the rear, so we have to go looking for that data.
Thanks. I think moving on to the next question, which I think we've actually covered pretty well throughout this entire conversation. It's this idea of how do you build self-sustaining engagement patterns within your company and team, and I think that relates to not just paying lip service to the idea of engagement and not just telling people that they need to be more engaged or telling managers you need to engage your employees or things like that, but creating really authentic ways to make sure that engagement starts and stays within the workforce and even at the upper levels as well. Carmel, how does Glassdoor go about making sure that the engagement that you are initiating sustains over time?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So we've thought a lot about how do you ensure that this isn't a one-off initiative, or any of the programs that we develop are not just kind of lots of glitz. They get launched and then you never hear of them again. And so it's like creating new habits around anything. We've realized that what you have to first do is take a very programmatic approach to any of the initiatives that you launch to help you boost engagement, so that over time you see repeated patterns and people start to sort of build that those mechanisms into their daily working rhythm. And so specifically, let me give you a couple of examples that will highlight that. So we gather data through our employee survey every quarter, and we sort of get a sense of where things are. And from that, we dig in to try to understand what the sentiment is that is flowing into that survey data. And so one of the pieces of feedback that we got a couple of times in our more recent surveys is that employees were looking for more in terms of career development. They wanted to feel that they had the opportunity to grow their careers here at Glassdoor. And so we took that pretty seriously, and we built some specific programs to help our employees feel like they do have the opportunity to grow their careers. And that was everything from formal training, but also to specific conversations as part of that monthly check-in that I mentioned earlier, to help people identify what it is that they're looking to accomplish in their careers. And then we also launched some newer things more recently to help embed that idea of career growth being part of our daily mindset here as employees at Glassdoor. So August is officially our Glassdoor Career Exploration Month in the company. And so we've run a series of workshops and speaker sessions for people to hear what it's like to work at in different parts of the organization. We've had, so we don't do this all out of HR. We actually solicit help from other parts of the organization and have them explain to other employees what it's like to be, for example, a product manager, what it's like to be an engineer, and help employees from the rest of the organization understand the different career paths that are available to them here at Glassdoor. And we built other sort of formal skill workshops to help boost employees' specific skill building around those. So the whole month has been this series of activities. And so employees have responded really favorably because it's not just helping them build specific skills, but it's also bringing the topic to the forefront of everyone's mind and making it something that is top of mind for everyone every day, and make sure that our employees know we heard them in the survey and that we take it seriously and we're trying to do something to help boost what they're asking for. And so our next step in that program will be to ask our employees, how did that work? Was, get some feedback from them and try to make changes and build extra stuff in where we need to, or dial back some of the things that maybe didn't land as well. And so it's back to this kind of continuous cycle of feedback, action, and then gathering more feedback and taking action on that. So we've definitely concluded that having a programmatic approach to this is as important as it is in any other area, and that engagement needs to be built and sustained over time, and that you have to continually work at it for it to be effective and self-sustaining.
Carmel, I really like what you said there, and as I was listening to you, I think it's important to highlight that as Carmel was sharing that example, it's obvious that Glassdoor is doing it right in that they're taking it down to every level. If self-sustaining, you have to be able to focus on the efficacy to the self, meaning what are the things that the individual employees are doing to contribute towards it. It's never meant to be, it's not going to be a self-sustaining pattern if it has to be driven for the top. Another example of that is, so Bamboo, we've been growing tremendously. And it used to be that everybody had a very tight working relationship with our founders. And that was super cool and fun. And it was a really sustaining force throughout the organization. And now at 300 employees, it's just not practical. They just don't have enough hours in the day to do that. And it's too distracting. And so how do we keep the cool feelings that we got from those experiences going? Which means other individuals need to step up and fill some of those voids. And to do that, one of the things that I recommend is how do you tell stories within your organization? Stories are vibrant. They bring these feelings. People will forget what happened. People will forget what you said, but they're never going to forget how they made you feel, right? And so share the stories and experiences that are going on. That's one of those things that you can do to help a really self-sustaining, engaged environment continue within your organization.
Shawn, any thoughts on this subject before we move on to the last question?
Yeah, I love the idea of this programmatic approach. Carmel, thanks for sharing that, recognizing that, all good things grow slow. All things on the farm grow slow. They're, governed by these natural laws. And also this idea that, self-sustaining is about the self, which I think is exactly right. And how do you help people tell their stories and tell stories that people can rally around? And so from a leadership perspective, one of the things that we really like to do here is to build leaders that are just incredibly empathic. that they know how to listen. They know how to really, they're curious, they're empathic, they have a desire to be able to walk in other people's shoes so they can even experience their stories. They can, and to do this programmatically, build listening capability into the organization, listening intelligence, you might even think about it. How well do our people feel like that they are being listened to by their leaders, on a regular basis? And I mean real deep listening, where managers have both the curiosity and the skill to be able to, create a space that is safe for team members to really be able to share their stories, and that they can depend on that safety, that they can depend on that listening. And so, at the grassroots level, what we're working to do is to be able to, from the research that we've done, we've learned that, when empathy is present with clarity, when there's very clear, direction of what the company's trying to accomplish and what it is that the mission is, that when you couple that clarity with empathy, we call it warm clarity, and managers are taught to listen, and there's this culture, there's this deep need and desire within the organization to understand the one, then I think from a leadership perspective, you're building the DNA which helps reinforce whatever engagement initiative and pattern that you are systematizing in the organization.
Awesome. Right before we move on to the last question, one in the Q&A, somebody asked if we're going to be able to answer all the questions, and we have never had so many questions, so we are overwhelmed and pleased by your engagement. And we will hopefully get the chance to answer one or two, but I just wanted to say that you can reach out to the presenters as well. Their contact information will be available, and I'm sure that they'd be happy to answer some of those questions for you. So the last question that we have here is, and I'm going to start with Cassie on this one. It's what do you do when you have a rock star in the wrong position, a really excellent employee who is excelling at what they do, but maybe, or has a great potential, but is in the wrong place, and there's nowhere to move them?
That's a tough one, and I think that's one of those difficult points that we face with engagement. Is some of the organizational and process constraints that your business might be facing, bumping up against the individual, the need, and their talent set. So the first question I ask myself is, what does wrong position mean? So if they're already contributing well, you have an ability to tap into their strengths, and it's about, do you need to tap into more of it more frequently? Or is this about, do you need to challenge them in new and different ways? And this is where it comes down to creativity, working with your management team, looking at those company goals, aligning the individual employee goals with that, so that you can take a strengths-based approach. You can consider giving special projects. You can actually challenge them to do something way outside of their realm, but it takes an awareness level so that as you're going about the day-to-day of the work, you're consciously looking for those opportunities. But I always like to also give ownership back to the employee on that one. If they need the challenge, if they need something different, helping to create that definition and identifying where it is or isn't. Because if ultimately you come to the difficult answer of that next position is not within your organization, then how do you continue to have that great experience and both receive beneficial outcomes until that change is appropriate? Hopefully you can find that alignment, but I think if you can't, be willing to acknowledge that and work together for the greater outcome, because you will buy a level of trust and loyalty from that person, even if they're not within your organization any longer. That's invaluable. Again, that's your brand living and breathing as you influence a human being and their career and path and opportunities while still trying to accomplish those company goals.
Thanks, Cassie.
I love that. I'll just jump in here on this from a leadership perspective. What an amazing thing is it when we have a leader who I'm going to go far to, I'm going to take this question as if it is, that really there's nowhere for this particular individual to move. And that really means that they've got to move out. Let's say that is the situation. I think that there's something amazing. Imagine if you were in this situation, you knew you were talented and capable, and your leader sits down with you and says, "Oh no, here's the deal. You're incredible. You're going to do amazing things in this world. Let's create the launch plan. What does the company need from you before you launch? What do you need from the company?" And this idea of the brand living on. I think Reid Hoffman's done this exceptionally well. I love what he's done with this whole concept of the alliance. And I've interviewed lots of people in LinkedIn who have left LinkedIn, who have shared their experience with me on this. But this idea of creating an exit strategy when that's a reality, but in the most humane way. Listen, people are watching. The conversation goes on. You know, this person in your organization is talking. And there is something so powerful when that is just owned in an organization, and leaders have the ability to, first of all, detect it, to know that you're in the wrong position. And then second, to just for it to be open and part of the culture to create sensible exit strategies. I had an experience with somebody that I was working with, and I'll just be very short on the story, but pretty much we learned that this superstar was in the wrong position and that he was going to need to move on and really wanted to. But before he went, we knew that he could do things for us that were incredible. So we created a launch. We called it the launch plan. And part of it was, what assets do you need to be able to really launch into where you're going? How could we use our resources and our network to connect you with what you are needing? And then here's this amazing job that we need to have done. And before this fellow popped out of our organization, he ended up closing a $4 million deal for us. He was an account manager, and did it so happily and left that customer in such a good position that it ultimately went on to produce $10 million more in this particular relationship. And he was just checking out. He was ready to kind of just turn on the back burners. And instead, when we created the launch plan with him, he actually turned on the afterburners. It did an amazing job for us, and we were able to use our resources to be able to help him land where he wanted to. And he went on to accomplish the things that he was hoping to in the next stop.
That's a great example. Carmel, do you have anything to add?
I'm a little conscious we're almost down to the wire, so I'll just chime in real quickly. Thank you for asking me. So, I think one of the things that Cassie said and earlier that I think resonated for me is you need to be conscious of your employer brand through this process. And so some people may need to move to a different organization. Maybe they max out in your organization, and being thoughtful about how you work with them through that is really important, because your brand lives on well past the current employees, and they often become boomerangs. They come back to you later on, or they talk to other people about how well they were treated and so on. And I think also there's another angle to this, is to think about how did you end up in the first instance with a rock star in the wrong position, and to have a more strategic view of hiring. And I think it's really important. We've talked a lot here at Glassdoor about making sure our candidates come to us well informed about what they're getting into, and actually we talk to a lot of our clients about making sure that their candidates are well informed, and so gathering as much data about the organization and for them to identify whether or not they think it's a strategic longer term fit for them, not just in the context of the role they're interviewing for, but in the larger scheme of things, if it's somewhere that they can grow as an employee and beyond their existing role. So two ends of the spectrum there, thinking about making sure they have all the information they need up front, but then after that, if it doesn't work out, that we as an organization treat them well enough so that they do think of your company as a place that they would want to go back to or refer other people to.
Thanks. It does look like we are pretty much out of time here. So unfortunately, I don't think we'll be able to get to any questions, but I've been told that the best way to get in contact with any one of our presenters is probably via LinkedIn. You reach out to them if you have a burning question that you just have to get answered. But I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and especially thank our presenters, Carmel, Shawn, and Cassie. And I'd invite you to follow BambooHR and Glassdoor on social media, and join BambooHR for Elevate, which is the world's largest virtual conference for HR professionals. And to join the conversation on Glassdoor with a free employer account. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.